I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications at the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. We're here in Geneva. We now have a week to go for the negotiations, and let's take stock of where the delegates have arrived in their conversations. The discussions over these 2.5 weeks are really about the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, something that's going to govern the way we work to save biodiversity up until the end of this decade. The framework has got a couple of main components delegates are talking about. They're talking about the goals and milestones and what they need to do before 2030. They're talking about targets, a set of 21 targets that define how they're going to protect biodiversity, how they're going to make sure that it's used equitably and sustainably, and then about the implementation mechanisms and the way they'll move forward. And they're also talking about the question of digital sequence information and how that feeds into the framework. Now, where have the delegates gone in these discussions? This is the first time they've met in over 2 years, and therefore there's a lot that they have to cover. They've met online, but they've just gathered text. Now they need to negotiate it. So when the delegates get together to negotiate, the idea is to take their views and come up with one consensus view. If they can reach consensus, that's great. They'll have sentences that move forward. If they can't, they have to put square brackets around it and then come up with an idea that everyone will agree with. The delegates have looked at the goals and milestones and the time frame. They've agreed that the goals are fine, but they need to have numerical values. They don't agree on the milestones. It's not clear that they need them. They're also not sure about the time frame. Given that this framework is only being implemented now, should they go to 2030 or beyond? What's the time frame? They've discussed these 21 targets. 8 targets that deal with protecting the status of biodiversity, 5 targets that deal with the question of how to use it sustainably and equitably, and then 7 targets that talk about how do we provide the mechanisms to make sure this happens. These texts are advancing. They're in a state called a non-paper, where there are a lot of brackets, a lot of areas where countries haven't quite agreed. They have to move and remove those as much as possible before the end of the week. That's a tall order, and it's not clear that they're going to make it. They also have to talk about this issue of digital sequence information. Will it be included in the Global Biodiversity Framework? Will it be addressed later on? What is the linkage? Remember that some parties say that if we don't discuss this issue and integrate it, there's no Global Biodiversity Framework. Others want a lot more time. So this framework is the point where delegates have to discuss. They have to reach compromise. They've got to make the text smaller. Let's talk with Elizabeth Maruma-Mrema, the Executive Secretary of the Convention, to see what she thinks the status is.
Negotiations are going well, although a bit slow, but it was expected in view of the long time that people have not met. And the remaining 7 days, we hope will move at a better speed. Also that the real negotiations will begin to reduce the text into simple, smaller ones.
So there you have it. The delegates are making progress, but they've got to go faster. They've got to look for compromise. They've got to stay focused on the issues, and they've got to make sure that what they're discussing is key and central. Follow our discussions this week, and we'll see where this goes. I'm David Ainsworth.